The hydro cannons rained silver death upon the human defensive lines. Soldiers braced for the excruciating end as the Rakari's most feared weapon delivered its killing payload of potent alien neurotoxin. The poison had already devastated countless other species in this brutal far future war. But something unexpected happened when the liquid projectiles struck human flesh and seeped into bloodstreams. Soldiers began laughing, intoxicated instead of dying. The human nervous system metabolized the toxin into a powerful narcotic, flooding their bodies with unnatural euphoria and lightning reflexes. Sergeant Mark Hill and his squad charged manically toward the Rakari line, high on alien chemicals. They moved with inhuman speed and coordination, easily overwhelming the shocked enemy. The hydro cannons, far from defeating humanity, led to a decisive human victory, as Hill's forces seized control of the Rakari's own neurochemical weapons. In the aftermath, human medics discovered the truth through hurried blood analysis. The Rakari neurotoxin could be refined into the most potent drug ever encountered. A new gold rush began as humans sought to plunder the biochemical treasure trove. Amidst the chaos, Sergeant Hill privately battled the toxin's dark temptation, even as the Rakari hailed him as an accidental hero. And light years away, a brilliant Rakari xenobiologist named Juno studied the disturbing reports from the front. She alone seemed to grasp the horrifying potential of what her species had unleashed. The hydro cannon's failure was only the beginning. In a pristine lab deep beneath the streets of Munich, Dr. Liam Erickson hunched over a microscope, his eyes locked on the shimmering green liquid in the petri dish. The modified neurotoxin swirled hypnotically, promising untold wonders and dangers. Erickson's hands shook slightly as he prepared a syringe, his eagerness to test the latest version of xenojuice tempered only by a thin thread of caution. The rush hit him like a tidal wave the instant the needle pierced his skin. Colors seemed more vibrant, sounds more crisp. Connections that had eluded him for weeks suddenly became clear as his mind raced with new possibilities for refining the formula. This was the breakthrough he'd been seeking. Erickson laughed, a manic sound in the empty lab. Thousands of kilometers above, Arcturus CEO Maximilian Hale glowered at a holographic display of Erickson's face. "You can't hide forever, Doctor," he growled. "That drug is worth trillions. It belongs to us." He jabbed a button and the image vanished, replaced by a slowly rotating schematic of a biomechanical hydro cannon. "Get me the president," Hale barked at his assistant. "It's time to renegotiate our defense contracts. I want exclusive production rights for xenoweapons, and I want that toxin." Light years away on the smoldering surface of a Rakari colony, Sergeant Mark Hill led his squad through the ruins of a hydro cannon battery. The once dreaded weapons lay broken and empty, their toxin reserves drained by daring human bioraiders. Hill's hands twitched, aching for the euphoric release of xenojuice. The craving had grown since Zephyrus, a gnawing need that colored his every thought. He imagined the wealth that waited in those shattered alien canisters, wealth enough to keep him high for a lifetime. In her hidden laboratory on the Rakari homeworld, Juno pored over a holographic model of a human brain, each neuron cluster glowing softly in the dim light. She stretched the model until a dense web of proteins filled her view. There, that tangle near the cerebellum. A simulation flashed on a side screen as she isolated the strands and dissolved them with a precise radiation pulse. The brain contorted, seized by spasms as the modified hydrotoxin flooded its system. Juno smiled coldly. It had taken months, but she had found it, the key to stripping away humanity's accidental immunity. All she needed now was a test subject. In the war-torn depths of space, ancient enemies circle each other, angling for any advantage in their long conflict. But now a new element has been introduced to their eternal struggle. A dark promise lurking in the molecules of a strange alien liquid, a drug called xenojuice. As demand for xenojuice exploded across human space, the remote Rakari research outpost on Charon found itself in the crosshairs of the notorious Black Nebula Gang. Alarms blared through the corridors as Dante Vega and his raiders breached the compound's defenses, leaving a trail of destruction in their wake. Dr. Juno raced through the chaos, clutching her daughter Asha's hand. "We have to get to the escape pods," she urged, her voice tight with fear. They wove through panicked base personnel, the thud of raider boots echoing behind them. In the hangar, Juno frantically prepped a pod while Asha watched, wide-eyed. "What about the others?" the girl asked, glancing back at the smoking ruins of the outpost. "We can't wait," Juno said, strapping Asha in. "I have to get you to safety." She hesitated, then pressed a vial of silvery liquid into her daughter's hand. "Keep this close. It's our only hope." The pod launched with a shuddering roar, streaking away from Chiron's surface. But the raiders were quick to give chase. Dante watched the pod's trajectory from the bridge of his ship, a predatory smile on his lips. "Follow them," he ordered. "I want that toxin." Liam Erickson watched the news feeds with a growing sense of dread. Scenes of xenojuice-fueled violence played out across the holoscreens, each one a bitter reminder of his role in the drug's creation. He turned back to his microscope, determined to find a way to undo the damage he had unleashed. But even as he worked, the noose was tightening around him. Arcturus CEO Maximilian Hale paced his office, barking orders into his comm. "I want Erickson found and brought in," he growled. "And get me an update on Vega's progress. That raider better deliver, or he'll wish he never crossed me." On Chiron, Sergeant Mark Hill led his strike team through the smoldering ruins of the Rakari outpost. The air was thick with the acrid scent of burnt metal and spilled neurotoxin. They moved cautiously, weapons at the ready, scanning for any sign of the raiders. A flicker of movement caught Hill's eye and he pivoted, heart pounding. But it was just a scrap of fabric, fluttering in the breeze. He lowered his rifle, disappointment bitter in his mouth. They were too late. Dante and his gang were long gone, along with the xenojuice. Light years away, a Rakari fleet commander named Zoran stood on the bridge of his warship, watching the footage of a human child gunned down in the raid. His eyes glittered with cold satisfaction as he turned to his subordinates. "You see," he said, his voice a razor's edge, "this is the true face of humanity. They are savages, and they will pay for their crimes." He tapped a control, and the screen shifted to display a sprawling battle plan. "Prepare the fleet," Zoran commanded. "We strike at dawn." The Rakari were going to war, and this time, they would not stop until humanity was nothing more than a memory. In her escape pod, Dr. Juno cradled Asha as the girl slept fitfully. Silent tears tracked down the scientist's face as she replayed the horrifying events of the raid in her mind. All her work, all her hopes for a better future, reduced to ashes in a matter of hours. She looked down at the vial in Asha's hand, the one containing her experimental counteragent to the xenojuice. It was all she had left now, the only thing standing between humanity and the hell of their own making. Juno closed her eyes, a grim purpose settling over her. She would find a way to finish what she started, at any expense. The pod hurled onward through the void, carrying its precious cargo toward an uncertain fate. The escape pod shuddered as it entered Meridian Prime's atmosphere. Juno clutched Asha tightly, her heart pounding. They had narrowly evaded Dante's pursuit, but now faced an uncertain landing on the bustling human colony. As they descended, alarms suddenly blared through Meridian streets. Juno's eyes widened in horror as she saw sleek Rakari ships emerge from stealth, unleashing a torrent of missiles. The pod slammed into the outskirts of the main settlement. Dazed, Juno stumbled out with Asha. "Run!" she shouted, pulling her daughter along as chaos erupted around them. Screams filled the air as a sickly green mist billowed through the streets. Colonists collapsed, writhing in agony. Juno recognized the telltale signs of a neurotoxin, but far more potent than anything she had ever encountered. "Mommy, it hurts!" Asha cried, her small body trembling. Juno scooped her up, sprinting towards a nearby building. She fumbled with the vial of counteragent, praying it would work against this new strain. With shaking hands, she administered a dose to Asha and herself. For agonizing moments, nothing happened. Then miraculously, the burning sensation receded. They were spared the full effects, but Juno knew they weren't out of danger. All around them, Meridian's population succumbed to the deadly bioweapon. In his Munich lab, Dr. Erickson watched the feeds from Meridian in stunned silence. The carnage unfolding before him was beyond anything he had imagined. His creation, his hubris, had led to this escalation. Guilt and rage boiled within him. He banged his hand on the desk, sending equipment clattering to the floor. No more, he growled. With relentless drive, Erickson began gathering supplies. He would find a way to stop this madness, even if it meant infiltrating Arcturus Industries himself. On the Rakari flagship, Fleet Commander Zoran surveyed the destruction with cold satisfaction. "Excellent work, Dr. Voraz," he said to the bioweapons expert at his side. "Scream has exceeded our expectations." Voraz nodded, his expression unreadable. The human metabolic pathways proved an ideal vector. They had no defense against... An alert chimed, cutting him off. A junior officer turned from his console, eyes wide. "Sir, we're detecting an anomaly. A small group of humans appears to be resistant to Scream's effects." Zoran's eyes narrowed. "Impossible! Show me!" The main view screen flickered to life, displaying thermal imagery of Meridian's surface. Amidst the sea of cooling bodies, a handful of heat signatures moved with purpose. "Paladins," Zoran hissed. "So the rumors were true. Voraz, it seems your creation isn't quite perfect after all." In the streets below, Sergeant Mark Hill led his squad of cybernetically enhanced soldiers through the devastation. Their hardened nervous systems had shrugged off Scream's assault, leaving them the only humans still standing. Hill's augmented vision scanned the ruins, searching for survivors. A flicker of movement caught his eye, a woman carrying a child stumbling out of a half-collapsed building. "Contact!" he barked, signaling his team to move in. As they approached, Hill felt a strange sense of recognition. The woman's face triggered fragmented memories, snapshots from his time before the Paladin program. He pushed the disorientation aside, focusing on the mission. "Civilians secured," he reported mechanically. "Proceeding to extraction point." Juno clutched Asha tightly as the cyborg soldiers surrounded them. She stared at their expressionless faces, a chill running down her spine. What new horrors had humanity unleashed in its quest for survival? As they were ushered towards a waiting dropship, Juno's scientific mind raced. The counteragent had worked, at least partially. If she could refine it, adapt it to this new toxin. She looked down at Asha, then back at the Paladin soldiers. A plan began to form. Somehow she would find a way to end this cycle of escalation. The fate of both species might depend on it. Juno's mind raced as she pieced together the fragments of information. The devastation on Meridian, the precise timing of the Rakari attack, it was too convenient. Her eyes widened as a realization struck. "Zoran," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the dropship's engines. She glanced at the Paladin soldiers, their cybernetic enhancements a stark reminder of humanity's desperate measures. Clutching Asha closer, Juno made a decision that would alter the course of the war. Hours later, in a secure communications hub on Cordaz, Juno's fingers flew across a holographic interface. Encrypting the transmission took precious minutes, but she couldn't risk detection. Finally, the connection established. Dr. Liam Erickson's haggard face materialized on the screen. "Who?" he began, then froze as recognition dawned. "Dr. Juno? How did you—" "Listen carefully," Juno interrupted, her voice low and urgent. "Zoran orchestrated Meridian. He's manufacturing this war, and I have proof, but I need your help to expose him." Erickson's expression hardened, the weight of his role in the Xenojuice crisis evident in the lines etched across his face. "What do you need?" "Meet me on Arcadia. Bring everything you have on the original toxin." The next 48 hours passed in a blur of covert preparations. Juno worked feverishly, modifying a diplomatic shuttle's environmental systems to conceal Asha's life signs. As they boarded, she whispered a silent prayer to whatever cosmic forces might be listening. On Arcadia, a nondescript spaceport on the fringes of neutral territory, Juno's heart pounded as she scanned the crowds. A figure in a worn synth leather jacket caught her eye, nodding almost imperceptibly. Erickson led them to a makeshift lab hidden beneath an abandoned warehouse. "I've synthesized a large batch of your counteragent," he said, gesturing to a rack of vials filled with silvery liquid. "But it won't be enough against Scream." Juno set her jaw. "Then we go to the source. We infiltrate their bioweapons facility." Erickson raised an eyebrow. "That's suicide." "Not if we have the right team." Juno pulled up a holo display, cycling through profiles of mercenaries and outcasts. These individuals have built up a tolerance to xenojuice. With your counteragent, they'll have a fighting chance against Scream. As they finalized their plans, the lab's door hissed open. Sergeant Mark Hill stepped inside, his cybernetic implants glinting in the harsh light. "I caught your coded transmission," he said, his voice a mix of organic and synthetic tones. "If you're going after Zoran, I want in." Juno studied the paladin, noting the conflict behind his augmented eyes. "Why?" Hill's eyebrows furrowed. "Because I need to remember what I'm fighting for." Days later, their retrofitted stealth ship cut silently through Rakari space. Juno's fingers danced across the nav controls, guiding them towards a sprawling research station suspended in the inky void. 30 seconds to insertion," Hill's voice crackled over the comm. In the cargo hold, the assembled team of mercenaries and outcasts checked their gear one final time. The ship shuddered as it docked with the station. Alarms blared, quickly silenced by their hacking protocols. Juno's heart raced as she joined the infiltration team, clutching a datapad to her chest. They moved swiftly through sterile corridors, disabling security measures and incapacitating guards. In a cavernous laboratory, Juno's breath caught as she took in rows upon rows of containment units filled with sickly green liquid. "There," Erickson pointed to a central console. "That's our target." As Juno interfaced with the Rakari systems, the true scope of Zoran's plan unfolded before her. Detailed reports on the Scream attack, projected casualty figures, political maneuvering, all carefully orchestrated to consolidate power and reignite the Rakari war machine. "We've got company," Hill shouted, raising his weapon as the lab's blast doors began to close. Juno's fingers flew across the console, initiating the data transfer. A stray shot struck a nearby containment unit, releasing a cloud of neurotoxin. She felt the burning begin in her lungs, even as the final pieces of intel downloaded. "Go!" she yelled, shoving the datapad into Erickson's hands. "Get this to Earth. It's the only way to stop him." Erickson hesitated, torn between saving Juno and preserving the invaluable data. With a pained expression, he made his choice. "I'm sorry," he whispered, before racing towards the extraction point. As consciousness faded, Juno caught a glimpse of the screen behind her. Schematics for a Scream antidote flickered tantalizingly, just out of reach. The last thing she heard was Hill's voice, distorted by combat and her failing senses. "Fall back! We've got what we came for!" Darkness claimed her, leaving the fate of two species hanging in the balance. The stealth ship sliced through the void, carrying its battered crew away from the Rakari research station. In the cramped medical bay, Dr. Erickson hunched over a workstation, his eyes fixed on the datapad containing Juno's final transmission. "We have to go back for her," Hill growled, his cybernetic implants pulsing with scarcely controlled rage. Erickson's fingers paused over the holographic interface. "We can't," he said, his voice hollow. "Not yet. This data, it's bigger than any of us." The ship shuddered as it entered Typhon's atmosphere. Through the view screen, a desolate landscape unfolded. Jagged mountains and sprawling plains scarred by previous conflicts. As they approached the makeshift outpost, Erickson's eyes widened at the sight of unfamiliar ships docked nearby. "Rakari vessels," Hill noted, his enhanced vision zooming in on the sleek alien designs. "But not military. What are they doing here?" Their questions were answered as they disembarked. A tall, willowy figure strode towards them, flanked by a mix of human and Rakari guards. Dr. Niara's iridescent skin shimmered in Typhon's harsh sunlight as she extended a three-fingered hand in greeting. "Dr. Erickson," she said, her translator rendering her clicks and whistles into accented English. "We've been expecting you." In the days that followed, an unlikely alliance took shape. Niara's team of Rakari moderates worked alongside the remaining paladins, pooling their knowledge to combat Zoran's bioweapon. Erickson threw himself into the work, driven by guilt in the weight of Juno's sacrifice. "The counteragent shows promise," Niara explained, gesturing to a holographic model of the Scream toxin. "But we're missing a crucial element. We need a sample from a human immune to its effects." Erickson's mind raced, piecing together fragments of information. His own exposure to metajuice, the paladin's resistance. "I might be what you're looking for," he said quietly. The extraction process was agony. Ericsson's screams echoed through the lab as Niara's instruments bored into his altered flesh. Hill stood watch, his cybernetic hand clenched around his weapon, ready to intervene if the procedure went too far. When it was over, Niara held up a vial of silvery fluid. "We did it," she breathed. "With this, we can synthesize Metascream." Their victory was short-lived. Alarms blared throughout the compound as a battered shuttle screamed towards the landing pad. Hill's squad moved to intercept, weapons raised. The shuttle's hatch hissed open, revealing a figure Erickson had hoped never to see again. Dante Vega stumbled down the ramp, his eyes wild and bloodshot. Behind him, a horde of desperate humans poured out, many bearing the telltale signs of prolonged xenojuice exposure. "I bring gifts," Vega rasped, holding up a canister of sickly green liquid. "And an army." As Vega's ragtag forces integrated into the outpost, tensions rose. The air crackled with the promise of violence, held in check only by the looming threat of Zorn's forces. Erickson worked tirelessly, racing to produce enough Metascream to protect their growing population. In the command center, Hill studied tactical readouts with growing concern. "Zoran's fleet is mobilizing," he reported. "We're out of time." Niara's multifaceted eyes narrowed as she processed the information. "Then we make our stand here," she declared, "human and Rakari, united against tyranny." As Typhon's twin suns set, casting long shadows across the war-torn landscape, the defenders prepared for battle. Paladin cyborgs stood shoulder to shoulder with Rakari dissidents. Vega's addicted soldiers twitched and snarled, terrifying by the promise of another fix. In his lab, Erickson stared at the dwindling supply of Metascream, painfully aware of how little they had to work with. He thought of Juno, of all they had lost to reach this point. With trembling hands, he loaded a syringe and rolled up his sleeve. "For humanity," he whispered, plunging the needle into his vein. As the Metascream coursed through his system, Erickson felt his mind sharpen, his senses heighten. Outside, the first explosions lit up the night sky as Zorn's vanguard entered the atmosphere. The battle for Typhon, in the fate of two species, had begun. Erickson's enhanced senses registered the first tremors of orbital bombardment before the alarms blared. He sprinted from his lab, vials of Metascream clinking in his pockets. The outpost erupted into organized chaos as Paladin cyborgs and Rakari dissidents rushed to their positions. Vega intercepted him, eyes wild and twitching. "Where's my share, Doc?" he snarled, grabbing Erickson's coat. "I need insurance for my product." Erickson hesitated, then handed over 2 precious vials. "Use it wisely," he warned, knowing the addicted kingpin would do anything but. In the command center, Hill's augmented voice cut through the din. "Zoran's vanguard has breached the atmosphere. Brace for impact." The first Scream warheads struck with devastating precision. Erickson watched in horror as swathes of defenders collapsed, writhing in agony. But pockets of resistance held firm, shielded by hastily constructed Metascream dispersal units. The Paladin engineers had worked miracles. Niara's multifaceted eyes gleamed as she pored over the data Erickson had shared. "We're close," she clicked, her translator barely keeping up with her excitement. "With this, we might synthesize enough Metascream to turn the tide." The lab shook as another barrage hit. Erickson steadied himself against a console. "Work fast," he urged. "We don't have much time." Outside, the battle raged. Hill's paladins fought with mechanized precision, their cybernetic enhancements allowing them to shrug off wounds that would fell a normal human. But Zorn's forces were relentless, pouring through breaches in the perimeter. Vega huddled in a makeshift bunker, surrounded by his dwindling neurotoxin stockpile. His hands shook as he injected a carefully measured dose, staving off the worst of his withdrawal. He mumbled incoherently about rebuilding his empire, oblivious to the carnage outside. A thunderous explosion rocked the outpost. Erickson stumbled to a view screen, his heart sinking as he saw Zorn himself leading a strike team into the heart of their defenses. The Rakari warlord moved with terrifying efficiency, cutting down defenders with brutal precision. Hill's voice crackled over the comms, strained and filled with static. "We can't hold them much longer. Fall back to secondary positions." Erickson watched helplessly as the Paladins were slowly overwhelmed. The command center erupted in panicked shouts as Hill's signal abruptly cut out. In the chaos that followed, no one noticed the shift in Rakari tactics. It wasn't until Britak's face appeared on every working screen that the defenders realized the true extent of their peril. "Your pitiful resistance ends now," the usurper growled, Zoran's blood still visible on his armor. "Prepare for annihilation." Erickson's mind raced. They had no chance against Bredik's reinforcements. His gaze fell on the neurotoxin canisters Vega had been hoarding. A desperate plan formed. "Niara!" he shouted over the din of battle. "We need to vaporize Vega's entire stockpile. It's our only chance." The Rakari scientist's eyes widened in understanding. Together they jury-rigged a delivery system, praying it would be enough. As Britak's forces breached the final defensive line, Erickson hit the detonator. A massive cloud of psychotropic vapor engulfed the battlefield. Screams of agony gave way to maniacal laughter as human and Rakari alike succumbed to the potent neurotoxin. Through the haze, Erickson watched in horror as friend and foe tore each other apart in drug-fueled frenzy. Hill's cybernetic arm, torn from its socket, sparked in a pool of mingled blood. Vega's cackles echoed from his bunker, cut short by a wet gurgle. The mist swirled, obscuring the carnage. Erickson felt his own mind slipping, reality blurring at the edges. He clutched the lab table, fighting to stay conscious as Britak's reinforcements loomed on the horizon. The neurotoxin mist thinned, revealing a landscape of twisted metal and shattered dreams. Erickson blinked, his vision blurry as he pushed himself up from the blood-soaked ground. His ears rang, muffling the groans of the few survivors emerging from their protective bubbles. "Dr. Niara?" he croaked, scanning the devastation for any sign of his Rakari ally. A three-fingered hand gripped his shoulder. "Here," Niara clicked, her translator struggling to function. "We survived." Erickson's gaze fell on Dante Vega, the once twitchy kingpin now eerily still. Vega's eyes snapped open, clear for the first time in years. He scrambled to his feet, patting his pockets frantically. "My stash," Vega whispered, panic rising in his voice. "Where's my—" "Gone," Erickson said flatly. "All of it." Vega's face contorted, a war between relief and terror playing out across his features. Niara's multifaceted eyes narrowed as she studied her makeshift sensors. "Bredik's ground forces are decimated, but more are coming. We have hours at most." Erickson's mind raced. He stumbled towards the ruins of his lab, praying the reinforced vault had held. The heavy door creaked open, revealing a glinting array of vials, the refined Metascreen prototype. "We need to move," he said, carefully securing the precious cargo. "But where?" Niara's mandibles clicked rapidly as she considered their options. "Kaldar," she said finally. "My homeworld. We have technology that can hide us. Give us time to plan." A metallic screech cut through the air. Resk, the last of Hill's cyborgs, emerged from the wreckage. His cybernetic eye glowed an angry red, focusing on Niara with predatory intensity. "No alien world," Resk growled, his voice distorted by damaged implants. "We fight. We kill them all." Erickson stepped between them, hands raised. "Resk, we can't win like this. We need—" Resk lunged, servos whining as he reached for the Metascreen case. Niara moved with fluid grace, a hidden blade flashing. Resk collapsed, his augmented body twitching as systems failed. Niara stared at her bloodied hand. I had no choice," she whispered. "You've made your choice," Erickson said softly. "There's no going back now." They worked quickly, cobbling together a slipstream-capable craft from salvage parts. Vega proved surprisingly useful, his nimble fingers steady without the constant tremors of addiction. As the first waves of Britak's reinforcements breached the atmosphere, their patchwork ship limped into orbit. Erickson clutched the Metascreen case to his chest, acutely aware of the weight it carried, not just physically, but the fate of billions resting on its contents. The slipstream drive hummed to life, reality bending around them. For a moment, Erickson dared to hope. Then everything went wrong. A blinding flash erupted from the planet's surface. The ship's systems screamed in protest as an electromagnetic pulse tore through them. Erickson's stomach lurched as the slipstream vortex destabilized, fracturing into a kaleidoscope of impossible geometries. He caught a glimpse of Britak's boarding craft, somehow caught in the same dimensional riptide. Then the universe shattered. Erickson tumbled through an eternity of swirling light in absolute darkness. His body stretched and compressed, senses overloaded by stimuli no human was meant to process. When he finally came to rest, gasping on solid ground, he found himself in a realm beyond comprehension. Ethereal streams of energy pulsed overhead, casting sickly light across a landscape that defied Euclidean geometry. Dante Vega lay unconscious beside him, the metascream case miraculously intact. "Niara!" Erickson called out, his voice echoing strangely in the non-space around him. There was no answer. A figure emerged from the swirling mists. Erickson's blood ran cold as he recognized the hulking form of Britak, the Rakari commander's armor scored and pitted, but still functional. "So," Britak's translator crackled, "it seems fate has brought us together, human." Erickson scrambled to his feet, positioning himself between Britak and the metascream. The Rakari's eyes gleamed with cold calculation. "Your allies are scattered," Britak continued, advancing slowly. "Lost in the folds of subspace. There is no escape from this place. Save one." Erickson's mind raced, searching for a way out. But Britak was right. They were trapped in a realm beyond their understanding, with no clear path home. "Give me the metascream," Britak growled, "and I might consider sparing your miserable life." "You'll use it to destroy Earth," Erickson said, his voice steadier than he felt. Britak's mandibles clicked in what might have been laughter. "Earth? You think too small, human. With that compound, I could reshape the galaxy itself." The alien commander's posture shifted, coiled tension ready to spring. Erickson knew he stood no chance in a physical confrontation. His only hope lay in his wits, and whatever eldritch forces governed this impossible domain. As Britak lunged forward, Erickson made his choice. He would not surrender the metascream, not while breath remained in his body. The fate of humanity, of entire species, hung in the balance. The laws of physics bent and twisted around them as their struggle began. A battle of will and intellect played out against a backdrop of cosmic horror. Erickson's fingers tightened around the metascream case as Britak advanced. The laws of physics warped around them, gravity shifting unpredictably. One moment, Erickson felt as light as a feather. The next, he struggled to remain upright under crushing pressure. "Last chance, human," Britak snarled, his armor creaking as he adjusted his stance. Erickson's mind raced. He glanced at the unconscious form of Dante Vega, then back to the looming Rakari commander. With a deep breath, he made his decision. "Fine," Erickson said, slowly extending the case. "Take it." Britak's eyes narrowed, mandibles clicking suspiciously. As he reached for the metascream, Erickson twisted, using the fluctuating gravity to propel himself backwards. He stumbled, nearly losing his footing on the impossible geometry of the ground. The Rakari commander lunged forward, cybernetic enhancements allowing him to close the distance with inhuman speed. His armored hand clamped around Erickson's wrist, wrenching the case free. "Foolish," Britak growled, backhanding Erickson with enough force to send him sprawling. "Now where are the others?" Erickson tasted blood, his vision swimming. He pushed himself up, acutely aware of the weapon now trained on his head. "I don't know," he croaked. Britak's translator crackled as he barked a humorless laugh. "You expect me to believe that? The slipstream vortex scattered you across subspace, but you must have fail-safes, tracking beacons, something." Erickson's mind raced. He needed to buy time, but how much could he reveal without endangering Niara and the others? "There's a signal array," he said carefully, "designed to triangulate our positions if we were separated, but I can't access it from here." Britak's eyes gleamed with cold calculation. "Show me." Under the watchful eye of the Rakari commander, Erickson salvaged components from the wreckage of their craft. His hands moved with practiced efficiency, assembling a crude subspace transmitter. All the while, his thoughts churned. Where was Niara? Had she survived the transition? A crackle of static filled the air as the device came to life. Streams of data flowed across its makeshift display, coordinates resolving into distinct clusters. There, Erickson pointed to a pulsing node. That's the strongest signal. It has to be Niara. Bredick studied the readout, mandibles clicking rapidly. Very well, he said finally. You will accompany me. Any sign of treachery, and I'll space you myself. Erickson nodded grimly. As Bredick called for reinforcements, Erickson's gaze fell on Vega. The former kingpin stirred, groaning softly. What about him? Erickson asked. Bredick glanced dismissively at Vega. Bring him. He may prove useful. Over the next hours, if time held any meaning in this fractured realm, Erickson found himself thrust into an uneasy alliance. Bredick's forces materialized from shimmering portals, securing their position before pressing onward. They traversed impossible landscapes, reality bending and twisting around them. Erickson's stomach lurched as gravity inverted, sending them walking along what had moments ago been a sheer cliff face. Vega stumbled behind, his withdrawal-racked body struggling to keep pace. A distant screech echoed across the void, setting Erickson's teeth on edge. He saw several of Bredick's soldiers tense, weapons raised. What was that? Erickson asked. Bredick's eyes narrowed. Subspace entities, drawn to the energy signature of your compound, no doubt. Move faster. As they pressed on, Erickson's mind raced. He needed to warn Niara somehow, to prepare her for what was coming. But how? The answer came as they crested a ridge of crystalline formations. In the distance, a pillar of light stretched into the void, a beacon. There, Bredick growled. Your allies await. Erickson's heart sank as he saw the collection of human militiamen surrounding the beacon. They were hopelessly outgunned. A garbled transmission crackled over Bredick's comms. The Rakari commander's expression darkened. It seems we have company, he snarled. Hostile entities, closing fast. As if on cue, the void erupted into chaos. Monstrous forms coalesced from the swirling energies, all tentacles and crystalline shards, defying description. They descended upon Bredick's forces with terrifying speed. In the confusion, Erickson saw his chance. He grabbed Vega's arm, pulling the disoriented man towards the beacon. Niara, he shouted, we need to... A searing pain exploded in Erickson's side. He stumbled, clutching at the wound where a crystalline shard had grazed him. Bredick loomed over him, weapon raised. I warned you about treachery, the Rakari commander growled. Before Bredick could fire, a massive tentacle lashed out from the void, slamming into his armor. The commander staggered, his shot going wide. Erickson scrambled to his feet, half dragging Vega towards the beacon. He could hear Bredick bellowing orders, the sounds of weapons fire filling the air. As they neared the human encampment, Erickson saw a familiar figure emerge from behind a makeshift barricade. Niara's multifaceted eyes widened in recognition. Erickson, she called, hurry! He pushed Vega ahead, turning to face the chaos behind them. Bredick's forces were being overwhelmed, the subspace entities swarming their position. Niara! Erickson gasped, clutching his wounded side. We don't have much time. Bredick has the meta-scream. We need to... A deafening roar cut him off as a new wave of entities materialized. Erickson watched in horror as Bredick's lieutenant, Grenkal, was engulfed by a writhing mass of tendrils. Inside, Niara urged, pulling Erickson towards a hastily constructed shelter. We have much to discuss. As the door sealed behind them, Erickson caught a final glimpse of the battlefield. Bredick stood alone amidst the carnage, the meta-scream case clutched to his chest, his eyes burning with purpose. The real fight, Erickson realized, was only just beginning. The shelter's makeshift door sealed with a hiss, cutting off the chaos outside. Erickson leaned against the wall, grimacing as he clutched his wounded side. Niara's multifaceted eyes scanned him with concern. You're injured, she said, her voice tinged with worry. Let me... A violent tremor shook the structure, sending loose equipment clattering to the floor. Vega stumbled, barely catching himself on a nearby console. "We don't have time," Erickson grunted. "Briddock has the metascream. We need to..." His words were cut short as reality seemed to ripple around them. The shelter's interior stretched and warped, colors bleeding into impossible hues. Erickson felt a sickening lurch in his stomach as the very fabric of space-time tore apart. In an instant, Niara vanished. Erickson blinked, disoriented. The shelter was gone, replaced by a swirling vortex of energy. He caught a fleeting glimpse of Niara's form, suspended in the maelstrom before being violently wrenched away. "Niara!" he shouted, his voice lost in the roar of subspace distortions. The vortex collapsed, leaving Erickson and Vega adrift in an alien vessel. Sleek, organic curves melded seamlessly with advanced technology. A trio of beings stood before them, their bodies a mesmerizing blend of crystalline structures and flowing tendrils. "Welcome aboard, humans," one of the aliens spoke, its voice resonating directly in Erickson's mind. "We are the Caldarians. Your companion's coded transmission has reached us." Erickson's mind raced, struggling to process the sudden shift. "Niara, where is she?" The lead Caldarian's crystalline form shimmered. "Adrift, but alive. We were able to recover you from the Nexus echoes, but she was pulled into a different current." Vega groaned, his withdrawal-racked body trembling. What's happening?" "Your actions have set greater events in motion," the Caldarian explained. "The Rakari forces are tearing themselves apart. Zorn's conspiracy has been exposed." Erickson's eyes widened. "Then there's still a chance. We need to find Niara, regroup..." "There is little time," the Caldarian interrupted. "Our supreme leader, Dralconis, awaits. We must discuss the path forward and the price of our assistance." Before Erickson could respond, the ship lurched. Through a translucent viewport, he watched as reality bent around them. The Caldarian vessel slipped into a shimmering portal, leaving the fractured realm of subspace behind. As they hurtled towards an unknown destination, Erickson's thoughts turned to Niara. He could only hope she had survived the transition, and that wherever she was formulating a plan to turn the tide of this interstellar conflict. Little did he know that far across the galaxy, a new threat was already taking shape, one that would make their previous struggles seem insignificant in comparison. In the depths of human-controlled space, aboard a derelict freighter, Dante Vega's eyes snapped open. His body burned with an unfamiliar fire, every nerve ending screaming in agony and ecstasy. As the first mutations began to take hold, a feverish grin spread across his face. The real war was just beginning.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.